There's no time for jokes and japes of an intro today, because it's here. It's finally here. What we've all been waiting for. The one thing that we never truly ever thought would manifest itself into reality, and that I never thought I'd be able to actually play with the entire universe working against me. The Final Fantasy VII Remake has finally dropped. Or at least it's the first part in a, well, who knows how long of a series it's going to be. However, it's just something that everyone has been eagerly awaiting for, well, far too many years now, since, well, the release of the PlayStation 3? And I know what you're thinking, I love Final Fantasy VII. I'd be amiss to not mention how I have this history of kind of loving the heck out of Final Fantasy VII. But at the same time, you might have been able to put that together from the fact that very clearly Cloud has been a style icon of mine since, well, who knows how long. But fret not, for I shall endeavour to remain impartial and approach the Final Fantasy VII Remake with clean, fresh eyes and no prior engagements involved. Oh my word, it's beautiful and amazing. So swiftly does this game's aesthetic and style take your breath away as you begin your adventure in Midgar. Anyway, the Final Fantasy VII Remake follows Cloud, a mercenary with big hair, a big sword, and an even bigger heart.
Come on, nobody do something this crazy just for money. They may not think you're a true believer, but you know what I think?
Not interested.
What?
Oh. You'll be helping the eco-terror group, Avalanche, as they go about their duties blowing up power plants that are rapidly draining the planet of precious natural resources, specifically the life stream in Mako, which is like vaguely the spiritual energy that keeps the entire world and life itself flowing.
The hell you think's gonna happen when it's all gone, huh? Answer me!
If this all seems incredibly poignant now, then don't worry, because it was also incredibly poignant 23 years ago. We've learnt nothing. But don't worry, because surely by helping Avalanche in their various endeavours, you can feel like you're finally making a difference in the world.
We head for the station. Then we take the train to your sister's.
I want to go home. Unidentified intruders have detonated a bomb inside.
Oh no. But don't worry, this isn't just all about Cloud, the big pointy dork that he is, because we've got a whole host of other characters to fall in love with and enjoy.
How sweet. When did you get so thoughtful?
The Final Fantasy VII Remake manages to expand on a number of the side characters such as Biggs, Wedge and Jessie, and give them more of a spotlight and a lot more of a character, allowing you to truly grow a liking to them. There's a number of extra side scenes and scenarios that really highlight these characters and reveals just how much of a bunch of lovable goofs they truly are. Or incredibly flirtatious, if you're Jessie.
Okay, I get it. Mind letting me breathe?
Depends. Mind coming over tomorrow night? My roommates should all be out for a while.
But it's not just the side characters, even the main characters have all had this wonderful glow up and are either perfectly nefariously evil or just incredibly weird and wild that it's hard to not fall in love with all of them, in some way or another. They all add to the narrative experience and just makes this semi-rompy story so wonderful as characters bounce off one another and there's this constant playful lilt that permeates throughout the whole game. Speaking of changes, let's talk about, well, the biggest change of them all, which isn't, well, the change from this into, well, this. Instead, I'm talking about the combat. See, in the original Final Fantasy, you'd have your whole little team of people standing in a line on one side of the screen, and then a line of monsters standing on the other side of the screen, and then you just take it in turns, hitting each other in the face with big swords. Here, in the remake, the game takes a more action-y approach where you directly control one character and get to run around and dodge and actively smash people to bits with your giant sword. While many will cry foul at this change, the combat in Final Fantasy VII Remake is surprisingly fun. There's enough level of complexity that you feel like you actively have to plan what you're doing a lot of the time. Yes, you can just do normal attacks as Cloud until the chocobos come home, but there's also a number of skills for you to use that help tackle foes and eventually stagger them for massive damage. This, alongside your materia that you'll be slotting around and your party's equipment, means you'll be constantly using the small ATB charges you and your party build up to be blasting and bashing a number of foes. And honestly, the combat feels kind of incredible. As you begin to learn what every single character can do, you begin to feel like this incredible tactical leader as you tell a person what to do and they do it. You just go, Tifa, go and punch that man in the face. And then she'll go off and punch a man in the face. It's incredible.
Going in.
But it doesn't stop there, because you can deftly swap between each character on the fly in the middle of combat, and each one has different moves and abilities and operates entirely differently. And eventually you hit this level of mastery in the combat where you transcend into what's more like a combat conductor as you swap between character to character, constantly always being on the offensive as you're telling directly what person to do what, not just by going into the menu and telling them to use a special move, but taking control of them to move them into a spot, to fire off some quick hits, and then move back over here. And it's incredible, because you, the player, will always end up feeling on the offensive, so it makes the combat feel increasingly more fast-paced, because even if Cloud is gonna cast a spell for a long period of time, or is dead, you're not just sat there doing nothing whilst that happens. You've swapped over to someone else to quickly get some hits off, and then they've got enough time to do a spell, so you swap back to someone else who's not doing a spell, and then you can do some more stuff. And it's incredible. And boss fights also have this in spades, because they always transform and change what they're doing in the middle of a fight, so you're always having to change what you're doing, so it means having to change what your characters are doing all the time. And it just feels, fast and punchy. Really, the only issue I have with the combat is that flying enemies become a total pain in the arse as you fruitlessly jump at them to try and hit them with your sword, and that when you're not directly controlling someone, they don't actually attack that often, so their bars fill up more slowly. But again, that's why you should probably be swapping between everyone and always be assuming direct control. Let's talk about some more wonderful changes in the Final Fantasy VII Remake. The music. See, the original Final Fantasy VII kind of cemented itself as turning out that video games can have good music. It is a classic soundtrack that people still, to this day, talk about as one of the best soundtracks in a video game of all time. And that is mostly down to Nobuo Uematsu, the granddaddy himself. However, in Final Fantasy VII The Remake, they sort of change all the music in a way that doesn't actually ruin your entire childhood. You see, there are a number of remixes of basically the entire original soundtrack for Final Fantasy VII, and they're kind of great, because they all have, well, they're all kind of made to be more modern, so a bit more pumping of a beat, etc, etc, all those hippity-hop words that the kids use these days. But they still have a lot of original elements and motifs of the original songs, so you can still be like, that's Lurking in the Darkness, that's sweet. And this is greatly demonstrated by how there was a moment where I was playing through the game, happy as can be, and almost like evacuated myself when a cutscene ended and just as the fight was about to start, this incredible remix of one of the original songs cut in, and I was just so overcome with awe because it was so wonderful. Honestly, the soundtrack was great. Speaking of remaking things that were classic, the entirety of Midgar has had this wonderful transformation that somehow still keeps the general feeling perfectly in place. The big chunky industrial piping everywhere, and the wonky and weird playground. The neon lights of Wall Market, including the strange minigun protected room. So much of the game is this wonderful homage to the original, while still claiming it for the remake's own. Even the dungeons, for want of a better term, have managed to be preserved, but at the same time expanded upon in a fun and interesting way. Sure, a lot of these levels are quite linear and have simple enough problem solving, but they're fun to explore and normally filled with their own atmosphere. Or, I guess, giant robot hands. That's not to say the game is beautiful all the time. There are sadly moments where I guess everyone decided that these doors didn't need textures larger than 2 pixels, and other moments where things can be a little...
That is how civilized people change the world!
That's right.
That is the Shinra Creed.
janky. Which then brings us on to something else that they changed in the Final Fantasy VII Remake, which is the ending. It's something that I'm incredibly conflicted about, and it's something that I'll go into in greater detail in the future because it's hella spoilery, but basically it adds what I can only describe as JRPG nonsense. Elements of fate and destiny and all that sort of jargon that you get in every JRPG ever, and it kind of just muddies the entire plot at times and all feels a little wishy-washy, splishy-splashy, dilly-dally, shilly-shally, and for the most part it's kind of incredible, but also I kind of had wished that maybe it wasn't a little bit different and they didn't have this weird fantasy nonsense and stayed in a more grounded plot about fighting an evil corporation, because really, that's what we kind of need right now. Final Fantasy VII cemented itself in history as, well, a classic video game. And the remake is, well, no different. It has high drama, extreme action, and like deep sadness. And to be honest, I'm so relieved that they managed to tonally keep it the same from the original, as it's filled with goofy characters and dumb side characters and scenes where you'll be howling with laughter.
Currently, the Airbuster is only 60% operational. The estimates were optimistic. I'm on air!
And also, you know, all the drama and tragedy that happens. Instead of it being this like tonally dire experience that basically all the extended media ended up churning out where everyone's sad and depressed, you have Cloud, a moody mercenary who is a giant dork, and he has to just make his way in the world while wearing a dress. It's wonderful.
Nice moves! I love it!
This, along with a combat system that is like simple enough that you can easily strut your way into it and really just get knee deep in the water, but also secretly complex enough that you can have a really good splash around in it and really get to grips with it. I have no idea what this metaphor means anymore, but either way, it is an incredible game experience that really has so much to offer. And if you've never played a Final Fantasy, or even haven't played Final Fantasy VII, and like you're worried about this not being a thing for you, don't be. It is a wonderful time to jump in on this experience and witness a classic gem of a game. Sure, we don't know how long it will be until we actually get to experience the rest of it. It could be decades until this entire thing finishes. Who knows? But it's good, and if you have played Final Fantasy VII before and you've probably already got the game, already played the game, so don't know why I'm talking to you. But if you haven't and you're like, well, I'm kind of worried they're gonna bastardize my entire childhood and ruin everything, don't be. Sure, there are some changes which will probably be contentious for some, but otherwise it is still this classic of a game because it builds from a classic game. It doesn't necessarily make it worse, it just makes it modern and beautiful, and I love it. Hey there, and thank you for watching my video. Just hanging out here with my two good pals, Cloud and Cloud, except for this is Cloud from Advent Children, where it's not as good. It's gonna go over here. Anyway, if you enjoyed that video, feel free to let me know. If you have your thoughts about the Final Fantasy VII Remake, why don't you let me know? If you have other stuff to say, why don't you let me know? You could like, you could subscribe, you could do all sorts of things that would make me hate myself significantly less, such as checking out some other videos, such as this one about Final Fantasy villains and which ones were good, or this one, which is about board games and playing board games online through the medium of video games and whether they're terrible or not. Or you can click on my face orb face here to subscribe, and that'd be great as well. Why don't you do that? Thank you, and goodbye.